there everyone, I'm Don, Professor Goway, and welcome to the Goway Pro Travel Tale podcast. Travel far and travel often.
It's getting a bit grey there, buddy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's actually all grey. I don't intend on changing that. I'm actually very proud of it.
You look very distinguished. Indeed. Hey there, everyone. My name's Don Forster, and welcome to the Goway Pro Trails podcast. Inspire, motivate, and educate. Today, I'd like to welcome a friend, actually. Though we haven't seen each other often over the many, many years we've been working together. I've known Marcel Perkins from Latin Trails, based out of Ecuador, probably 15-odd years now from my time here at Goway, looking after the Latin America department. And Marcel runs a company, as I said, Latin Trails, based in Ecuador, which we'll talk about in a minute, about what he does and his team does down there. But today we're just having a chat to Marcel as a Ecuadorian. And Marcel, you were born in Ecuador, is that correct?
I was actually born in the United States, but my first trip to Ecuador was when I was 9 months old. And my parents moved to Ecuador permanently when I was 7 years old. And I grew up in Ecuador. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I remember now that you said that you were US born, but I didn't realize that you'd moved at such a young age down to Ecuador. So I would assume now you hold both passports, American and Ecuadorian?
Yes, I do. I actually have both nationalities. My mother's Ecuadorian, and my father, he was American.
Okay. Now, one thing I've always been very impressed with yourself, because you spent a lot of your life, or most of your life in Ecuador, is your English is exceptional, which most of our partners down in Latin America, they have wonderful English, much better than my Spanish will ever be. So did you go to school in Ecuador and all the States, a combination?
Well, most of my schooling was in Ecuador, actually. I owe my English to my late father. He took the time to talk to us in English all the time, so we didn't forget, the language. And he made it a case to bring us up every summer. So we actually would, have sometimes even a week or two at a high school, or in the town where he grew up. So that was what we would actually do.
Okay, so did you do university in the US? Because again, a lot of the people that I've known over the years working in Latin America would often, when I'd speak to them, they would have done their university or some of their university in the US or Europe for that matter.
Well, I did do part of my university in the US at the County College of Morris in New Jersey.
Oh, New Jersey.
Yes.
Ah, okay, Jersey. Okay.
Jersey, yeah.
So with that little personal look into your background there, professionally, what led you into tourism and to establishing Latin Trails over the many years ago?
Well, I have always been inspired by my mother in that sense. She would always take us to travel all around South America. My dad was from the U.S. and she wanted him to, get to see the entire region for us to understand where we came from. Because, at some point, the plan was actually to come back to the U.S. and establish ourselves, which never really happened because we enjoyed being in Ecuador so much. And we took such love for the country that, we ended up living there and I ended up growing up there. And when I studied marketing and finance in the university I went to. And I was, and I got hired to promote a cruise line in the Galapagos Islands. And it was it's a really nice company. At that time, it's Klein Tours, and I know you know them well. They're one of your partners as well. At that time, I was hired as a marketing assistant. Within 2 weeks, I was the marketing manager.
2 weeks only.
Yeah. Well, it was not. It was really not dedicated to my talent, and at any moment at that time, it was just being probably fit for the job in the sense that I was the only one that had a passport, could travel anytime and everything, and. For some reason, everybody had quit at that time. It was a really big transition in the company. They were bringing in a boat that was called the Galapagos Discovery. And the boat had an accident, so it went to Panama to get fixed. And at that time, the boat burned down in Panama. It was really a disaster at that time. And I was the only one left sitting at that spot. And I didn't know what was going on. The owner of the company, Maria, which... we became really good friends later on. She was out of the country when this happened. at a trade show, and basically I was thrown 1 month. I guess it was my first month in the company to go and visit companies all around the world and tell them what happened and how we're going to fix it and how we're going to change it. So
Right.
with no experience at all, I just was put in that position. At that time, of course, they were going to hire somebody, to be my boss. But I guess that's when I really kicked in, and I just didn't want that to happen. So I just proved that I could carry this on my
You could do it.
shoulders. And 2 years later, I don't know, fast forward or not, but I was launching the Galapagos Legend in
Wow.
in Santiago de Chile at the Travel Mart at that time, and I made the presentation for everyone, and then I handed over everything because I decided that I wanted to do a little bit more than Galapagos. I really wanted to promote Ecuador. My passion was for Ecuador, for communities in Ecuador. Specifically, I started working with a community near Otavalo called Runa Tupari, and offering community-based lodging at that time. I remember
Okay.
going to one of the travel marts the next year after launching this, and my consigna at that time was not have Galapagos in the equation. I was very young and very dreamy. Well, I had about I had about 120 appointments at that travel mart. I remember nobody. I don't think anybody's gotten that many. I actually had to call in for help to former the colleagues that were working there. My company was very small. I didn't have anybody. I had to get hired guns in to help me take on all the appointments. Well, 1 year later, we didn't have any travelers. That's not putting Galapagos in the equation because we had all community-based travel programs, very well designed and everything. But the thing is nobody was going to make any margins because everything was really community-based and really basic, but really nicely organized.
Yeah.
But not thinking on the business side of things, but more on the dreamy side of things.
Right.
And
Right.
so it was. That's what pushed me into establishing a relationship with shipyards and leasing out boats and helping them build boats later on.
Okay, so a couple of questions based on that that little passage of conversation there. A question for you: post-COVID or even pre-COVID, is Latin Travel Mart still a happening thing, or is that now part of history?
Well, it's a lot of people say it's part of history, and this is like 10 years back because they never developed new business for new operators.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So a lot of new operators that would join and try to get business out of it would not get anything because it was older partners with older partners just meeting together and not opening anything for anybody else. So that's
Right.
the real deal about the travel mart. We actually had it this year in Ecuador, which
You
was
did? Okay.
for us. I mean, personally, I always get good results out of the travel mart. Everybody else still complains about it. So, well, it's because it's just how you see. I mean, and what you see in it and what you're looking for.
Fair enough. Yeah, I just curious because I hadn't really seen much. Mind you, I'm not in the loop as much anymore, so that's probably why I haven't seen any emails about it. So I was just curious if it was still around. Now, the other question too is, it might sound like an obvious question, but you've been there almost from day dot. Particularly with Klein, who or now Go Galapagos, one of the bigger operators down there with yourselves. Is Ecuador still, again, I'm going to use this word, is Ecuador still struggling to fight the fame of the Galapagos when you talk about the country and with all the mainland offerings that it has? Is it still a struggle from a business point of view to pull people away from the Galapagos and visit the mainland?
All the time.
All the time,
But
still. Okay.
yes, it's a double-edged sword, as they say, but it has to do with us ourselves doing that to ourselves. I've always tried to promote Ecuador. I've always tried to get people to visit and spend more time in mainland Ecuador. But if travelers are not visiting the Galapagos, they're not coming from North America. All honestly, yes. I mean, they're coming from Europe. They will spend more time, but still, it's very difficult. And then you have governments in the past that, and actually lately, just a few years ago, somebody was saying that, we're going to have a 1-by-1 equation, which is for every traveler we bring to the Galapagos, we want to bring one to stay a week in Ecuador, and we want to reach X million amount of tourists, which was the dumbest thing ever because you could not bring 1 million people to the Galapagos in 1 year. So
of course,
it would just destroy the island. So it had no sense, and they kept on using the Galapagos as the buzzword to promote Ecuador. Now I think that it's trying to, we're trying to pull away from that. I've always constantly done that, but it still is the case that, the Galapagos, for example, even in the biggest crises Ecuador has, the Galapagos is always with travelers there, which is, on one side, it's good. On the other hand, there has been issues with over-tourism. It's been controlled now, but still.
Right. Now, for those that are in the industry and have a decent memory, Ecuador throughout the years, or at least in my time, so it's been about 15 or 20 odd years involved in Latin America, Ecuador Tourism Board has thrown big money at the country. They've had at one point a Super Bowl ad using the Beatles music, that type of thing. So they have invested very heavily in promoting the country. And as you say, like Peru with Machu Picchu, that's, Peru's known for that, and they have trouble getting people elsewhere. Same with Ecuador and the Galapagos. This is just a hypothetical question thrown your way. If the tourism board or the Ecuadorian government stopped marketing the Galapagos altogether and marketed the mainland, do you think you'd lose business to the Galapagos, or do you think there's enough common knowledge about it that people would still travel there without being told about it?
You don't have to tell people about the Galapagos. The destination is going to sell itself. Yeah, no. They want to go because of all the historic background it has. It's such a big destination. I mean, there's so much word of mouth out there. You don't have to promote it. It gets promoted by, travelers that go every time, come back so happy, so amazed, I mean, because really it is that destination. No, I cannot take that away from it. And that's one of the things that we really, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's so good. You get such satisfaction from guests that visit, and it brings us so much repeat business because of that, because we offer unique experiences, the small yacht experience, the small ship cruise where you actually are visiting, the more remote islands and being close to wildlife, face to face, just a couple meters away, and animals not being afraid of humans. I mean, you can't replicate that anywhere else.
No, you can't. And again, as you say, it's sort of, its fame precedes itself. So for our travel partners out there listening, as you've heard, there are two there are more than these two areas, but just for a generalization statement here, you have the Galapagos, which is Ecuadorian territory. Obviously, you can only get to the Galapagos from Ecuador. And then you have the mainland. And I think what Marcel was referring to earlier in regards to travelers from North America is the recommended length of trip to the Galapagos would be 7 to 10 days. You can do shorter cruises, but then I think Marcel would support this. You then rush it because it's a day to get there, a day to get back. So when you're looking at an itinerary of 7 days, you're actually spending 5 full days out there. 8 equals 6, so on and so forth. And just by the nature, let's talk an 8-day cruise, which is probably one of the most popular. 6 days full. And then you've probably got a day to get to and from the country itself. So there, for most Americans particularly, but also Canadians, there's their 2 weeks per year. And that is why a lot of people don't see mainland Ecuador, which is a shame. Now, as Marcel said, he dreamily, quote unquote, looked at doing the land-owning, the community-based product in these early days, but he then kept that, but then looked at the boats as well. So, Marcel, can you give us a bit of a rundown of what Latin Trails has become since the inception of your community-based concepts?
Absolutely. I mean, we've kept on working with communities, and we're very tight with, local, let's say, micro entrepreneurs, because I don't want to, just, catalog them as indigenous people, because it's not just indigenous people. We work with everybody that is actually in a part of the destination, and that means the local culture. On a global basis, we work with artists, artisans. We've developed. We've invested in Ecuador heavily. For example, in the San Marcos neighborhood in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. This is a neighborhood that is both residential, but at the same time, it's part of the UNESCO heritage area of Ecuador, of Quito. Now,
and that'll be generalized as the old. Sorry to interrupt, Marcel. That'll be generalized as the old town Quito, correct?
Yes, generalized as the old town Quito, but San Marcos is part of it. and
Yep.
it's this small part of it that is residential. Well, we have neighbors there that don't necessarily have to be an artist. We have Miss Gladys, for example. She knows how to make the local ice cream of Ecuador, and
Yes.
she would actually go and sell it on the streets eventually. That was her business. Well, as you know, we have a small hotel in Quito, Ila Experience Hotel. It's a 10-room property. It's a luxury property. It's in the San Marcos neighborhood. We did not want a luxury hotel in a poor neighborhood. So we invited all our neighbors to sit down with us and think of what they could share with a visitor. And Miss Gladys said, well, I can teach them to make ice cream.
Nice.
So we are inclusive in that sense. She comes with her bronze cauldron, and she comes and makes the ice cream, and we buy her whole production for that day, so she doesn't have to go out and sell that on the street, but she offers it to guests, to our staff, and everybody shares, an ice cream cone and learns how to make it. And she'll bring in different flavors. She'll come with other creative things. And if it's not ice cream, if it's a cold day, she'll make pastries, or she'll make, we have it's not a donut. It's like it's a fried,
Fried pastry, isn't it?
yeah, it's a fried pastry. And it's made with sugarcane syrup, and she does it the traditional way and shares that also with our guests. Our guests get to go hands-on, participate, make it with her, and talk and learn about how she's actually put her daughter through college with this type of small business.
Oh, wow, really? Oh, that's a huge success story then.
Yes, and this is one of the people that is one of our neighbors, and then we have others that a little bit more artistic. For example, Jerry Reynoso, he's a watercolor artist. He was actually my daughter's teacher, and he lived in the San Marcos neighborhood. So we invited him to offer lessons on the rooftop at Ila. And that's also a huge success. Travelers come with families. Kids love to do the watercolor because he teaches it in such a didactic way, and also adults. And it's so nice to have your own souvenir that's created by yourself. You're not going to become an expert artist, but you're actually interacting, with somebody that is from the city, that has lived there, and that is inspired and still loves painting, the buildings that are around him. So that's his labor of love, and that's what we share with our guests.
Well, and I think that's what people are looking for these days as well. It's giving back both financially as well as in person, and being more interactive with local communities. And as you say, be it indigenous populations or just locals on the street as well, which is obviously what you're working towards. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you also have some community-based initiatives in the jungle. And for those who don't know, Ecuador, as I was mentioned, you have the Galapagos, you have the coast, you have the Andes Mountains, so you're at altitude there. And then off the back of the Andes, you have the Amazon basin and rainforest. So one big selling point of Ecuador. And when you look at there, and if it's the first time, obviously the Galapagos will probably be part of it, is you can do 4 regions, and you can do from the Galapagos to the Amazon within those sort of 2.5 weeks. So as an extension of that, Marcel, I interrupted myself on my own question of, you have some community initiatives in the Amazon basin as well. Is that correct?
Yes. And leading on from what you said, Ecuador is, I want to add another area that is obviously sometimes forgotten, is the cloud forest on both sides of the Andes.
Oh, yeah, of course, yes. Yeah.
And, Ecuador being such a small country, you really can go through cloud forest and then reach the Amazon. So actually from Quito, this is what a lot of people don't know. The Amazon is only 3.5 hours away by car. And as you drive down, you go through hot springs, you get to see part of the volcanoes, you get to see the cloud forest, and then you end up reaching the lowland rainforest after going through waterfalls and different areas. And this is the area that you're talking about. We have a small project that's it's close to a town called Archidona. Archidona was one of the first towns, built in the Amazon of Ecuador. And it's run by the entire local community. How did we get involved in this? Well, I have 2 partners for this. With their families, we found a plot of land that was actually in this area of the Amazon. It was a cattle farm. This was back in the day, about almost 15 years, I would say now, a little bit more than that. And when we were going down there, we said, well, we could build a lodge, maybe we could do something with it, but we don't have at that time we didn't have the funds, but maybe we should just secure it, because it was being sold cheap, because they had destroyed everything, and it was just, a mud puddle. Actually, it wasn't even good for cattle anymore because they didn't have grass. So that it went down to that point. So we said, well, this is close to a large wildlife reserve that's over 90,000 hectares, extends all the way into the Andes, the Colonso Chalupas Reserve, and there's 2 communities nearby. So we thought it would be a good idea, to purchase the land and then see what happens there. See what happens the idea was to actually reforest it, though. So this is something we started doing with the local community, and to learn on what trees to put there, because we didn't want to just go and bring a whole bunch of trees and plant them there and find out that that we've planted eucalyptus where we weren't supposed to. No pun against that, but Ecuador has so much eucalyptus.
You do have a lot of eucalyptus down there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it actually destroys the soil. So we wanted to make sure we did it right. So we invited a couple universities to help us with that, and that was the start of the lodging part, because we had to actually house students and teachers that were going to come and help us reforest this area with the local community. So we had a small research station / lodge, and we were spending time down there, going down, and actually, to convince our kids to get down there, we had to come up with a story. So we called the place Hakuna Matata.
This is where that name comes from. Oh, okay.
So, of course, my older daughter, she wouldn't bite it. She was like, oh, whatever, this is not Hakuna Matata. But, her siblings and the other, and my partner's kids, they were smaller. So they actually, kept on calling it that. Now the area is known as Hakuna Matata. Just, fast forward.
Really?
Yes. Even the community says, "Oh yeah, we, the community say, yeah, we live next to Hakuna Matata. Oh, okay, we know how to get there."
Lovely,
so
lovely.
It's a reference point. So eventually, what ended up happening is we reforested the area. It's a secondary growth forest now, and of course there is some. There's still patches that have to continue to grow, but we do have a healthy forest there, and there's a lodge that's run entirely by the local people from the community that helped us reforest. And some of them have been with us from the very beginning. We even held on to, some of the horses that were at the place, and, it kept them, because we did have a small patch of grass and all that we continue to hold on to. But all that is now a secondary growth forest. And what's interesting is that, it continues to generate and regenerate. And now we find different. Sometimes we find monkeys coming into the property, or
Nice.
or different species, and little by little. It's not a big thing, but it's more botanical. Yeah. There is the mountainside of the property that was never touched, so there is primary forest there as well. So it's only 125 hectares. For that, for a wildlife reserve, that's small. For us, it's. You could take 2 days to walk it. So.
Yeah, but still, it might be small comparatively speaking, but it's an area that was a mud pit before. Now it's bringing in wildlife. Baby steps. Baby steps is the way to go. So it's going to be an obvious question, but why is this type of tourism important to you personally and important to you professionally?
Well, personally, because it allows us to, share not just our story or the story of our travelers, but the story of the communities that are in the country. Because people interact, and, we don't have a script for them. We just,
Right.
They tell their story, they tell what it is, what their struggles are, and our travelers get to see that. That's something that we've always been advocates of. And this is in San Marcos, or in Hakuna Matata, or in any part of Ecuador, or even in the Galapagos Islands. And, this is something that is important, because, it's not turning locals into an attraction. And there's somebody you're visiting that you can actually befriend, that somebody you can interact with and learn about, and they will learn from you too. And I think that is one of the biggest values in travel. And it's why I am in travel, and why I believe in travel, is because I get to know people that I would have never known. I get to learn about them, and I get to make friends from all around the world. I have friends everywhere. In that sense, and okay, I don't see a lot of them all the time, but if I ever go to, if I ever go to Poland, I know I have people that I can really give a big hug to, and I'll be grateful to see, and share a lot. So those are things that I love about travel, and why we do it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It was just the other night I was having dinner with some friends, and we were talking about my time as a tour guide, which was primarily in Latin America, And I pass on those exact sentiments, saying that, in the world of travel, I'm going to quote exactly what you said. You will meet people that you would never have met in your sort of normal day-to-day life, be it from a professional point of view, from a personality point of view. Like, it's just, and again, I'll echo again what you said. I'm in the same situation as most people in the industry. I have friends and acquaintances all over the world. You mightn't see them all the time, but again, they're out there, and anytime you're around, you have a beer and you can catch up on some good old stories.
There's some good friends I can think of in Toronto that are Australian.
Yeah, just a few. So you mentioned earlier one of your early community projects, and now how it's the jungle one itself, how it's grown to be I guess self-sufficient. There's employment being generated down there as well. What other success stories have you had within your World of Latin Trails and your community-based tourism?
Well, I mean, I think that regarding the Galapagos, I just want to focus on that. Is one of the, I think I see it as that is that when we actually built the first yachts that we were building, these were the first yachts with lower berths, not private bathrooms because that already existed, but lower berths and windows. So
right.
And that was actually the standard and the footprint that has brought out all the catamarans that are there now and all the upmarket yachts. Then our next step was actually to make it try to make it as sustainable and avoid introduced species. And I think by putting the hydroponic plantation on San Cristobal Island, we're stepping towards that. And I think that we want that to be. We really hope that could be a new standard. Along with a lot of other things that have to be done in the Galapagos. But although, I mean, the Galapagos are so well protected, specifically on the boat side of things, and now that the government has implemented the proper changes on the ground side as well, because the hotels, all of them have permits, they have all the standards in place and everything. But now with the hydroponic plantation, we are sourcing all our produce locally.
Oh, wow.
We're not bringing it. We're not putting the produce on the planes, but we're actually growing it on San Cristobal Island, and that actually is farm to table on board the Seaman Journey.
So is that or was that one of your initiatives, or was that a general initiative by all the boat operators out there?
It's an initiative by I don't want to say us alone, but the family that is my partner in Galapagos, the Romero family. Franklin and William, they're the owners of the permit of the Seaman and our partners on board the Seaman, and they had a plot of land in the Highlands that was overridden by the blackberry, and it was just all these thorn thickets, and the thing was, to clean that out, it would grow back in a week, so it's not something you would actually be happy to be doing all the time. The problem is that this invasive blackberry came in the 60s. This is actually very at the dawn of tourism, probably not even related to any tourism activity. It just arrived. And the thing is, it's so sour, you can't use it even for juice or for anything, not even for a pie. The thorns are this big. You just can't pass through it. And it destroyed all the other native plants. So the Vermilion flycatcher, for example, became extinct on San Cristobal Island. You cannot find it there. You find it on other islands of the Galapagos, but not there, and other places around the world. But this was an endemic species or a subspecies on San Cristobal Island. Well, what happened was they cleared the property, and at first they still have this. They had a chicken coop for the eggs for the boat and everything, and that's still there as well. But then they decided to start farming, but it was just their plot of land was not big enough for that, so they decided to do something with hydroponics, and it just went so well, and it was a small project, and it grew, and now we can actually supply the entire food for the year on board the Seaman with the produce that's grown there, and it keeps that part, and the gardens and everything around it clean of blackberry with native plants that have grown back, and that's it's a small garden, but actually in having it being productive is the only way to avoid the blackberry from growing back, because otherwise you wouldn't have the resources to go back up there and be cutting that every week.
Cutting it back, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So sorry, go on.
No, and basically that's the way I think. There has to be, and this is I learned when I in my failures actually I learned that that if you don't put the economy into the equation, and there's not something that is producing, you're never going to be able to sustain a project. It has to go hand in hand.
Okay, so here's some general questions for you. How many vessels, roughly, if you don't know the exact number, you probably do, are cruising around the Galapagos at the moment?
I could be wrong, but I think it's 63.
53. That's not as many as I thought. Okay.
No, 63.
And then
63.
Oh, 63. Okay. And how many hotels roughly would be on the islands, plural, because they're on a few islands?
Oof. There's it's in the hundreds.
In the hundreds. Okay. So you mentioned this farm to table is supplying one vessel. You're the seaman for the year. Is it supplying other vessels? And I guess what my question is leading to, could an expansion of that type of project initiative in time supply a higher percentage of both boats and hotels on the islands?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the soil in Galapagos is so fertile. I mean, the oranges on San Cristobal Island are the sweetest oranges I've had. We've actually had a complaint. I mean, these are not our oranges because there is other farms there, and there is farming in Galapagos. Not necessarily. I mean, the boat owners have to actually, go and build a hydroponic plantation. They could buy from other plantations that are starting to appear, and it's not the only hydroponic, but I think it's one of the very few. But for example, if you have we had complaints from the oranges on San Cristobal people telling us that we added sugar to the orange juice,
right?
And that they told us, that they could not have it because they had diabetes. I'm like, whoa, we never would add sugar to orange juice. It's just that these oranges are extremely sweet. So. But that's the thing. You do have good soil. You do have good production, and I'm not saying turn it into agricultural land. But there are parts,
of course,
of the highlands of San Cristobal, Santa Cruz, Isabela Island that are better off being turned maybe into agricultural or mixed use, because otherwise you have invasive species that are going to continue to grow there, and that's a problem on Santa Cruz Island. The blackberry is eliminating the Scalese forest. And right now, I mean, the national park has an agreement with one of the larger cruise companies, but it's not allowing everybody to visit it. Well, all right, sorry, I shouldn't even mention that, but it's a very private, venue. They've agreement they have, but it's I think it should be open, but it's a good initiative. The idea is actually to reforest, but it's not just reforesting, because if you just reforest and you leave the Scalese trees or the native trees there, the blackberry or any invasive species that is stronger is going to come back. But if you have a small agricultural production or, a bee farm or anything that is going to produce you some kind of revenue, you're going to go back and you're going to keep your patch of land clean. And that's what we think is what would make the difference for this to work for other boats. Now, don't get me wrong. Other boats do source a lot of stuff locally. For example, they buy from the local fishermen. Mm-hmm. That's why sometimes in the Galapagos, you'll be on a boat and you'll think that you're going to have 10 varieties of fish. No, unfortunately, they only caught one variety that week. You're stuck with that for the whole trip. And the chef has to do marvels with that, because we don't want to, bring in, we only have tuna, so we're not going to buy we're going to go and buy other fish. No, we're going to stick with what we could source locally, and we'll have to be creative with the recipes. Sometimes that happens in the Galapagos as well.
So, most of what you've told me, other than the sort of later developments of the hydroponics and local sourcing, which is awesome news because, as you mentioned, it brings revenue to the local families and people on the islands. But two, it's protecting the islands by keeping all the introduced fauna at bay. Sorry, I'm going to edit this out. I just forgot what my question was going to be. Oh, okay, here we go. Do you see? And again, you've been involved in the industry for such a long time. From what you tell me, it seems like Ecuador is, if not at the forefront, it's definitely near the front of the pack in regards to this community-based sustainable travel. And again, it mightn't be in your face sustainable to the traveler, because I'm sure a lot of the people who are on the boats particularly may never hear about the hydroponics or, the fishing and buying from locals, hopefully through this podcast that, shed some light. Now, I know Peru, I know Bolivia, like all countries around the world are pushing harder and harder on this community-based sustainable travel. But it sounds like to me Ecuador has been knowingly or unknowingly doing it for many, many years. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I mean, we have, for example, communities near near the Otavalo market. As let's put it as a landmark, but the whole area is the northern Andes of Ecuador. And again, the community we started working with, Luna Tapari, they still offer lodging in the backyard. If they have a backyard lodge, let's put it that way. Their backyard is quite big actually because it's a farm, and it's a small house with its own private bathroom, and they have their rooms there, and they actually greet guests to come and stay with the family and spend time with them. And that's not the only community. There's one behind the Imbabura volcano, San Clemente, and there's several small projects like this all around Ecuador. And the fact that people would visit the small villages where the people, the Otavaleño culture lives, and are invited into their homes and learn from them and sit down, in some cases to listen to Andean music at a Andean instrument workshop, or sit down and have one of the community tables and share some guinea pigs sometimes if you're adventurous enough to do that. Not everybody does, but that for one part. Or in the Amazon itself, there's many projects in the Amazon that involve community lodging. And I'm not talking about just Hakuna Matata. Hakuna Matata, it's a private project, but it's run entirely by the indigenous community, which, the local Quechua community that we are partners with. But there's other projects that are also actually part of the community, entirely run by the community, that you could stay with them. For example, just to name one, the Cofan. It's close to the Cuyabeno Reserve. And just to name one. And then they have their own lodging. Of course, it's very basic, but it's almost like staying at a family home. And of course, and what is missing there is probably development standards and things like that, and maybe partnerships. I think Ecuador lacks that a partnership law that can protect the investors, because unfortunately, in some cases the communities, it's a different way of thought, and it's not you can't say that that they're being crooks or anything, but they end up keeping the project sometimes because it's their land, it's ancestral, and it's not been there's not a law that the government facilitates to protect both sides, because on one side they're taken advantage of by the oil companies that come in, but on the other hand, tourism projects don't get that support legally to actually flourish enough. So there's few that have and that continue to go, but it is a challenge. Everybody that is down there, and I'm talking about all the lodges, they know that challenge. That they're always there's that struggle to keep the community happy as well, because it's been ancestral land for them, and for one reason or another they sold it, maybe because of economy, or it was taken away at some point in time. But
so I guess that's what a lot of people don't realize, and until you brought up, I was sort of aware of it, but not that aware that there are two sides to the story, and you will often hear about the indigenous population or even just local communities be taken advantage of by big business, so to speak. But I didn't realize that there was, be it consciously or just, as you say, not knowing how it's done, that it'd work in reverse as well. But that really shouldn't be surprising, I guess. But yeah, interesting. Okay. Now, I was just in Mexico, and when we landed, there were quite a few signs around the arrivals terminal about child exploitation, sex trafficking for minors, that type of thing. And it's sort of making news in the US, particularly with border issues in the recent election. I know that you stand against any type of that type of thing, of course. But what's Ecuador's stance on that? Because again, and I'm talking the stories we hear that from Central and South, people are moving forward and they get smuggled through for all different reasons. What is the stance by Ecuador on that sort of child exploitation concern?
I think Ecuador and all of South America is completely against it. No government in its right mind would be in favor of something like that. I mean, by all means, and the general population is against it. I think that just because this is my backyard, South America is very morally strong against that. By every sense of the way, it would be never accepted. So, and of course, I mean, there has a lot more to be done. I mean, there's stuff being done. There is the children's court and police that protects children and all that. That is established legally, and there's all the laws against exploitation of minors in every sense of the way, to the point that Ecuador actually exaggerated on not being able to employ anybody until they're 18 years old.
18.
Yes, so that actually has. I mean, it's very hard to for a child or a young adult to to gain experience unless there's this very special internship or something for them to actually get a job. For example, in the U.S. And this is something I see because I've always taught my kids to work from a young age, not too young, but not exploiting them. But
Yeah.
I wanted them to have jobs but legally they would, if it wasn't for me as a parent hiring them and teaching them. For example, at the hotel, we would give them a room to make themselves, and they would have to do it professionally in their time on a weekend, or once they were 16 or something. And that was their you'd say their afternoon job, and that's normal in North America and other parts of the world. But in Ecuador, they put in a law that was too strict. On the other hand, so I think
So does that? Sorry to interrupt. Because again, I made that introduction to this subject, sort of inferring the the darker side of this statement, child exploitation. But again, I think the thing I wanted to get to is what you've brought up. It's again, and it might have changed. Sounds like it has. When I was down there touring around, you would see a lot of very young children. And again, this is also socioeconomic. They'd be on the streets selling chiclets and just trying to make a living through that. So you're saying Ecuador's taken steps to try and curtail even that aspect of children not being exploited per se, but just having to do it to survive.
Yeah, well, that is actually the purpose of it. Yes, of course. I mean, and when you get into exploitation, the children you see on the streets, actually, the story is very sad, because I can tell you all the background behind it. Is that these are kids that sometimes are even rented by their parents to the people that are there, so that they can help them go and ask for charity and
Right.
cause pity and get money, and then at the end of the day, their parents get a cut of it, and the people, there's gangs that are organizing that in sense of
Right,
way,
okay.
when you see that. So it is a big social problem. It's not, it's and the other part of the exploitation. I know that this is the rough part, when it comes, even rougher when it's when it comes down to sexual exploitation and all that. That has been combated a lot, and it's been a priority, not just in Ecuador, but I think in all of South America, to eradicate completely, because it's just it's something that, I mean, should not exist anywhere in the world.
100%, and I don't think anyone out there would disagree with that statement at all. And again, I just brought it up because I know that's one of your stances at Latin Trails, to protect children, and you follow. I can't remember what there's an act or an organisation I think you guys are part of or follow as well, which is commendable, of course. But again, I just wanted to just voice it, because people may see young children on the streets working. But it's good to know the background to that. So let's get on to a much happier topic. So I've got these questions in this particular, but I'm going to switch them around a bit. So what is the perfect trip in your mind, excluding to a degree budget, but definitely excluding time? So let's sort of say 3 to 4 weeks if someone had that much time. What's the perfect trip to Ecuador in your mind?
Well, I would definitely start with the North Andes.
Mm-hmm.
I would go from north to south, basically. I would really, I would go into the North Andes, visit the local cultures, stay with a family near the Imbabura volcano, learn about the agriculture there, see the scenery, get to see the arts and crafts, visit the small villages. I would go a little bit further north to the El Ángel Páramo. This is where you have the unique species of the frailejón. It's an Andean plant. And I would include at least a quick pass through the Chota Valley. A lot of people don't see it. Travelers don't make it up there. And it's actually, you don't only find, you have the African Ecuadorian community there, but it's almost like a desert. And in the bottom part of the valley is an oasis. And it's something that you would not find in other parts of the Andes. Then I would continue through staying at one of the haciendas, regardless of which they all have the history and they all have that charm. Some of them a little bit more high end than others, and I'm not looking into just high end. I'm looking into really spending quality time, and of course, at some point in time, including hot springs, because you're going to be driving around. So it would be, I would say, 3 days in the Northern Andes at least, then going towards Papayacta, and then heading into Quito, giving Quito its well-deserved time.
100%.
A few days walking in the old town, but also getting to see some of the, I wouldn't say newer things, but for example, the Guayasamín Museum, which is also, it's more of a modern art. But of course, he started painting in the 1930s, so it's almost a century old. Some of his paintings, but it's still considered, kind of, let's say, modern art and expression. Then I would say, I would drive to the area of the volcanoes. But one of my favorites, near Quito would be Antisana. Antisana volcano, not at a first glance because it doesn't have the perfect snow-capped peak, but you actually have the canyons nearby, the lava flows. You have the condors that are flying in the canyon nearby. And then I would go into the backside of Cotopaxi. I would drive into the we call them the water springs, and then into the area that is called the Anaurco. You have wild horses, wild deer, and all that in that area. You have trout fishing, and spend a night camping in that area. Really roughing it out a little bit, but seeing that backside of the volcano and seeing everything, the giant stones from past eruptions and the lava fields, all that is there and present. And it's just not, when it gets proposed to somebody, I might not have time for that, but it's so beautiful and it's so peaceful and warming. Then I would actually drive into the Amazon.
Right.
I would drive into the Amazon, regardless of the area that we visit in the Amazon, but let's say close to Archidona, Tena, visit the Quechua culture, go by the waterfalls. Then in the area of Puyo, visit one of the lookouts, because the lookouts in that area actually, not up into Puyo itself, but in the area, you have, for example, Indichuri's lookout. You have this lookout that has the Pastaza River flowing towards the Sangay volcano. The Sangay is almost, it's the perfect cone, just like Cotopaxi, but it's erupting all the time. So you actually can see smoke coming out. You have the rainforest surrounding you, and you have the river flowing towards it. And it's far enough away to really enjoy it. It's magical. And then of course I would from there I would continue actually through the Amazon before returning into the Andes. I would actually go all the way down to Macas and meet the Achuar people. But on the way I would stop in one of these small places that is kind of hidden. It's called Laberintos del Chihuahua. These are stone. It's a stone maze in the middle of the jungle that nobody knows why the stones are there. These are natural stone formations that are there. So then go on, meet the people in Macas, the Achuar people, and then drive back into the Andes through Guamote. But to Guamote, this is the market where the train used to go by, and people would be sitting on the tracks and move out of the way just for the train.
Right. Okay. Right.
So it has one of the highest indigenous populations. Enjoy the people there. Backtrack a little bit to Riobamba, which is a beautiful city. It was the first capital of Ecuador. You have the Leon, the Teatro Leon. It's a theater that's in a private home. It's a full theater. That it was a home in 1910, but now it's a museum and all that. But they have every Thursday night they have a free concert there. It could be classic music. It could be the orchestra, the symphonic orchestra of Riobamba. They've invited people from the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra to play there as well. And they have these beautiful concerts every Thursday or events there that are just so unique.
Nice.
And then spend some time there in Riobamba and enjoy the food, enjoy the culture, and then go on the backside of Chimborazo. Meet if he's still around, he's a legend, Marco Cruz, and stay at his lodge on the backside of Chimborazo. With another day, drive to Salinas de Guaranda. Salinas is where there was the salt mines. So this is it's a very small scale version of what you'd find in Maras. You might find 2 or 3. It's almost like a souvenir, but they have the salt there. But more than that, they have a community that is thrived in weaving, making chocolate, cheese, and other artisan agriculture products. And that is really, that even exports actually to the European Union as fair trade commerce. So they've really developed that. And the scenery in the area is just gorgeous. And from there, there's several lookouts. You can actually see all the way down from the Andes to the Guayas River and the coast of Ecuador on a clear day. So that's one of the views that is really, I remember growing up with, because when we would go to the coast, we would always stop there and sit down and just have a look at
where
it.
you're going.
Yeah. And you'd see everything, spreading below. And then, of course, then I would continue south to Cuenca. Cuenca, I would give it 3 or 4 days. For me, it's the most beautiful city in Ecuador. Even having a hotel in Quito, I have to say it. I mean, Cuenca really, I mean, it blows every other city in Ecuador.
It is pretty, yeah. Yeah.
It's so pretty, but it's so nice, traditional, well kept, clean. You have boutiques, hotels, every three corners here and there, and it's just so nice to stay in the downtown area. You can walk around. This is where they weave the straw hats. This is where you can have the mote. It's the hominy corn with different recipes, motepillo and all that stuff, and really, Andean cuisine that is at its best. And then I would take some time actually to go a little bit further south and visit the Saraguro community. I think that, the Saraguro community is one of the really strongholds of the indigenous communities in Ecuador. They still wear their traditional attire even more than the people in Otavalo. In Otavalo, the younger crowd is wearing blue jeans and t-shirts. In Saraguro, they still wear their traditional clothing.
Oh, so the Otavalo is starting to lose its look, I guess?
Maybe the look, but not the heart. I mean, you never stop being who you are, but, it's like I can't tell them, don't wear these jeans because we like to see you with your traditional attire.
Oh, no, of course not. But that was one of my favorite spots in Ecuador was Otavalo. I've been there, I don't know how many times.
It's still there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's still people that hold on to it, but it's not as strong as before in that sense.
Okay, interesting.
But Saraguro is really, really like out of time. And back in its place, it has a nice waterfall. Visiting the community, you can see wood carvers, weavers, and you have one of the best chefs in South America. The food is superb. It's called Chamuico Spy. Samuel Ortega. I know this is. I mean, this could be. I could give a whole podcast about him and his food because we've enjoyed so many amazing meals there. He offers 9-course meals, fusion cuisine from the Andes, the Amazon, and the coast. If you look at a map of Ecuador, Saraguro is actually the town that is closest to both the Amazon and the Andes at the same time. So he gets all those products. And his background, well, he's a community leader. He learned to cook with his grandmother. But in the crisis Ecuador had, when we switched to the dollar around 1998, around that time, he migrated to Spain. And he got hired by 2 kitchens, one at a time. 3 years at El Bulli, when it was the top restaurant in the world, working with Ferran Adia. I don't know if I got his name right, but okay. And then after that closed, he went on to work with the Canroca brothers, Jordi Canroca and that family, and he learned from both, but he did not bring any recipes. He learned technique and how to bring out the best of what you have locally. So he does farm to table at a level that is impressive. And then, of course, if you're in Saraguro, I would go onwards down to Loja, which is a beautiful city, comparable to Cuenca, but on a smaller scale. Not as well known, though. And then from Loja, take advantage of that whole southern part of Ecuador. Visit Saruma, which is a town that is all built in wood. It's an Ecuador heritage. It's very small. The architecture is at the same level as Cuenca, but everything in wood. And it's built on top of a gold mine. And then nearby there, since there's not really good hotels to stay at, there are lodges, though. There's a bird watching lodge in a reserve that's called Buenaventura Reserve. This reserve is one of the last patches of Chocó in the southern part of, because the Chocó extends, from Panama, it goes all the way to Colombia into the northern part of Esmeraldas of Ecuador. And then it breaks there. And I think there's part of it is at Mashpi Lodge. And that's where they officially say it ends. Well, in Buenaventura, it's a microclimate that actually emulates the hottest parts of the Chocó in Panama with such biodiversity. I haven't seen as many woodpeckers, not just hummingbirds, but, tangers, flycatchers, and all these unique species of birds in one place as at this lodge.
Wow, so a bird is heaven there.
Yes, and not just birds, but you have snakes, you have a lot of other things that you don't always want to see, but they have signs that have to remind you to wear your boots.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Sounds like Australia.
Well, it is very biodiverse, and that patch of it has one of the top, and it has a really nice lodge that you actually can use to stay at and visit Saruma. And then, of course, I would end up by driving back up towards the coast, And if you have time, I would actually, I would, I mean, at a different, I would actually visit Guayaquil just to understand the city and go onwards towards the coast, but north towards Manabi, and try to make it to San Vicente. San Vicente, there's a project called Iche. It's a restaurant that is also houses one of the top chefs from Ecuador, Valentina Gonzalez. I'm not sure about her last name, but Valentina, she's a really good friend. And it's a school that houses young talent from all around the coast of Ecuador and teaches them how to cook. And it's not, although it's by the coast, it's not by the ocean. It's actually in the highlands of the coast, inside the forest, because they have so many natural species and spices, and they have different types of peanuts and everything. And that's where the real, that's where they have the best cuisine of Ecuador by far. I mean, and this is, you sit down at any table at any family home down there, and you're going to have one of the best meals ever, because the way they cook, and they still have the horno manaba. Actually, Manabi has been named as a intangible heritage of Ecuador's cuisine because of this. The horno manaba, it's a brick oven or clay oven that is on top of a wooden box, and you have 18 ways of cooking using that oven. And they just do marvels with it. So that would be my perfect trip. And I didn't put the Galapagos in, sorry.
And of course, you then finish up with the Galapagos.
That would be, that would blow anybody's mind in 3 weeks. I mean, it would be such an amazing journey. But that they probably wouldn't even have to go to the Galapagos. Maybe save it for another trip.
Yeah, well, there you go. Save it for another trip. So just to wrap up there, so a couple of things. Food was always good in Ecuador. I say past, haven't been there for a while, but it was always excellent. But it sounds like from what Marcel is saying now that you could literally do a culinary-based tour throughout, excluding any of the wildlife and other cultural experiences, and be blown away. I think you've heard also, as we just discussed, or more the point Marcel put forward, his perfect trip to Ecuador, it didn't even include the Galapagos. It was all mainland from coast, Andes, into the Amazon. So this is the big thing about Ecuador, which a lot of people don't realize, is that the diversity is amazing in a very small area. Literally, you can drive from Quito, the capital, to the Amazon, and then you could fly to the Galapagos if you want the best of everything. It's that compact, easy to get around, be it by road or by plane. And then, of course, you do have the Galapagos itself. One thing I just want to quickly go over before we say goodbye, Marcel, is the accommodation choices. You sort of mentioned as you've discussed everything today, but if you could just reiterate, it basically from camping 3-star all the way up to very high-end luxury throughout, be it coast, Andes, Amazon, or Galapagos, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You have all levels of accommodation. I mean, you have homestays with local indigenous communities. That could be at a 3-star level. Then you have haciendas that are, in general, a 4-star level. 1 or 2 of them are a 5-star. And then you have ultra luxury lodges and small boutique hotels in different areas. I mean, you have, not to self-promote yet, I will.
No, please do.
But you have Itza Hotel in Cuenca, which is a new opening. Then you have Mashpi Lodge, which is actually part of Quito. It's a beautiful, very high-end lodge. And we have Ila Experience Hotel. Yep. Here goes the self plug. Ila Experience Hotel in the old town of Quito. That's our baby. It's 10 rooms. It's actually, it was actually the concept and everything is really led by my wife, Marisol. She's the one that's behind that and actually in front of it, not behind it, but in front of it. And she's the true leader at that, and she's really done the design. She's developed the experiences and really has made it flourish.
And for anyone listening, we can, again, we have been working with Marcel on that particular property since it opened as well. So anything that he has mentioned today, we being Goway can help you with. And one last thing, and it is a total self-plug for yourself, but I've got no problems with it. How many boats do you have in the Galapagos?
Right now we have one, the Galapagos
Islands. Oh, just one? I thought you had 2 or 3. Oh,
no,
okay. Sorry.
In COVID, we had some issues with
Oh, right. So, okay. And it's the seamen, as you mentioned, farm to table produce on board, which is even a bigger bonus. Okay. So only the one vessel now, the seamen, which I think I might have been on years ago? I can't remember. I've been there a few times, lucky enough to have gone a few times. But just a quick rundown, because again, there are different vessels, anything from 16 berth up to the Legend you mentioned, which you launched, which varies anywhere between 90 to 110, depending on the configuration at any time. So where does the Seaman sit in regards to the other vessels available in the Galapagos?
Well, it's a nice first-class yacht. We've focused, we've kept it up. We've upgraded it. We have beautiful cabins with private facilities in lower berths. But I think, our biggest draws are the farm to table, the hydroponic plantation behind it. The crew we have has been with us for 15 years. We have also the itineraries. We made some small changes. Now we have 4 nights and 6 nights. So you actually have 2 4-night programs, one of them visiting the northern part of the Galapagos, the other one visiting the south, and then the 6th night goes all the way around the west. And on board the Seaman, we've implemented citizen science programs. So we have the Happy Whale program and the Garbology program, which is actually where our guides lead our guests and help them share their findings with the scientific community. They get feedback. They've identified whales that have been seen in Antarctica or have been seen in Alaska as well. So that is something that, our guests get that feedback and get to be interactive with. And during the summer, we have children-friendly programs with coloring books and special activities for them.
Okay, so I just want to point out too on the itineraries on offer, the 4 and 6 I assume can be combined to give you a 10 or 9 day itinerary. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
And again,
the 2 4s can be combined to be a 8-night, 9-day.
Right. And the reason that they're broken down there, and this is one of the positive things that's been happening for many years, is the authorities out there control where certain vessels are at certain times. So, they're not running in a circle all the time. They're going to all different parts of the islands, 1, to share the love around the islands, but 2, not to overpopulate, oversaturate any one given spot at any time. So you rarely pull into a mooring and probably see no more than 2, 3 vessels in there with you, if that. And so it's very well organized, and that's hence why you will see north itinerary, south itinerary, east, west itineraries. And as we just pointed out there, they can be combined to go from 4 to 8 or 4 plus 6 equals your 10. So on that point, Marcel, it's been a joy speaking to you. We hadn't spoken for a while. It's good seeing you again. Good chatting to you, getting a bit more of your background history. It's always fascinating. Again, going back to one of our earlier points, meeting people, hearing their backgrounds and their stories. You've had a very interesting run in Ecuador. You're doing a lot of really positive stuff through Latin Trails. So I commend you highly on that. It's something that Goway supports. We're trying to get ourselves more aligned with that as well as we move forward. So it's a joy working with partners who have been doing this for years and years and years in very, very positive ways. I think, as you can tell from Marcel's story today, he has made a huge impact around Ecuador with his initiatives, and kudos to you again. Congratulations to you. And buddy, really good speaking to you, and I really want to thank you for your time today, and thank you everyone else out there for listening in. We'll talk to you all soon. See you later.
Okay, see you later. Thank you, Don. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, that was awesome.